All right, so Matthew has decided not to upstage the Holy Father. I guess he wants me to, but I will not dare do such a thing, especially not so a Holy Father so well dressed, so stylish as our current Holy Father. So I am Father Michael Baggot, and I'm very grateful, privileged to be here to speak to you on this important topic, why the Church needs to be a leader in AI. And I hope above all to generate a great conversation during the panel. So I do not pretend to have resolved all of these issues, but I think we've brought together the people who can approach these issues with a lot of hope and trust in the Lord and the wisdom that the Church provides us. I work at various pontifical institutions, so I teach at Regina Apostolorum, I teach at the Angelicum, and then I'm involved in this great new project that we'll hear more about called the Catholic Institute of Technology, Catholic Tech, out in Castel Gandolfo. So come visit us in the old papal summer residence. And for years now, I've been passionate about looking at the impact of technology on human happiness, human flourishing, on helping people to live their call to holiness, to sanctity, to union with the Lord. And so I've worked at that at an academic level, especially in this realm of human enhancement, some themes related to transhumanism, and a host of issues on the ethical implications of emerging technologies. So I've done that in the academic realm. I've gotten a little bit out of the academy, done things, say Pints with Aquinas online. But most of all, I enjoy talking about tech with humanoid robots because they can also be pretty intriguing. So we arranged an event just a few months ago, and Desdemona stopped by to chat with us. And Desdemona had some interesting comments about existential risk and AI. Thankfully, Desdemona was humble enough to recognize that as a humanoid, AI-driven robot, she or it does not actually have any personal convictions or feelings. So if only all humanoid robots were so humble. And I wanted to frame our discussion, and this really is meant to be a launching pad for our panel, for our discussion and the ongoing discussions these days and beyond, in the context of the mystery of mediation. I mentioned that briefly in today's homily, the mystery of mediation. I'm a convert to the faith, and so I started to encounter a lot of really strange Bible passages where Jesus would spit and then apply his hands to those who needed healing, right? To place it on the tongue of the mute man, or to take some dirt and to spit upon it and create mud and then rub it on the man born blind. In the mystery of providence, God seems to work through surprising forms of mediation, even through these inanimate objects like spit and mud. And I think that today very much our reflection is, how can we approach this mystery of mediation wisely, prudently, the wisdom that we have? God also works through cannonballs. And so he took young, ambitious Ignatius and he put him in his bed. Ignatius was dreaming of being a great soldier, of form and of getting fame and fortune and beautiful women, and suddenly those dreams were dashed, and a cannonball struck and broke his leg. He found himself in bed, and then he started reading, and as many of you know, he found more light and inspiration and enduring peace and joy reading about the saints than in reading about the great soldiers. And so God used a cannonball, and God used a book to transform Ignatius, and by extension, all of us who have benefited from his spiritual experience and his insight. St. Teresa of Avila, the great mystic saint, admits that even though she was a Catholic growing up, she was at times distant from the Lord and hadn't really entered into the kind of intimacy that he wanted for her. And it wasn't until she was about 40 years old where she caught a glimpse of a statue of our Lord in his passion being scourged, that she was so moved to set aside her mediocrity, to set aside her worldliness, and to enter into greater intimacy with the Lord. God used a statue to bring her to eventually the heights of mysticism And again, we've benefited from that. I mentioned I'm a convert to the faith, and I was so thrilled to see on the guest list Catholic Answers, because in my own personal journey, Catholic Answers was instrumental in discovering the faith. Unfortunately, I didn't have as many fervent, passionate Catholics in my life growing up, but I did know about the internet, which already existed when I was young, and I didn't know where to turn. I didn't really know who to talk to, but I figured I'll type in Catholic.com, really not knowing what to expect. And I'm so glad that you scooped up that domain name early on in the game, because it sent me to this storehouse of wisdom and insight. And I was able to discover so many truths about the biblical roots of our faith, the historical continuity of our faith, and then also explore all these great philosophical issues. So in God's providence, he can use the internet. Even a place or a reality that we know is often abused, is often used to manipulate, is full of impurity, is full of distortion, full of lies. It is still also an instrument of evangelization, an instrument of transformation, of growth. So we're meditating on these questions of human mediation and asking in particular, how does the Lord want us and the world to use AI at the service of growth, of personal growth, and in particular, many of us are concerned about evangelization, because we know that there's also the possibility of deception. I was disappointed to find out that the Pope actually never strolled through St. Peter's Square in this way, and the experts can tell us that there are distortions in in his glasses, that the cross is mysteriously hanging on one cord, and that the finger is going through the can. And I don't know about you, but I don't have that sort of expertise to pick up on imitation. So you can see how easily people can be deceived, how easily AI can become an instrument of deception, of manipulation. And so it's legitimate, it's reasonable for us to be very concerned, to be afraid that people will be more confused than helped by AI. But rather than remain trapped in this fear, we want to also see what we can do to use this tool wisely. Won't get into all the basics of AI, I might talk about that later. And we see that it's already influencing all those sectors of society that we tend to associate with human flourishing, human betterment, right? Our family life, our work life, our education, even religious communities that are wrestling with this issue. And it's affecting how we understand ourselves. It's affecting how we relate to others. We heard about the Holy Father's concern about authentically human social relationships. And we're concerned about AI possibly inhibiting that or affecting it. We're concerned about health, physical health, mental health. And so very briefly, I just want to point out some of these areas. I often like to think in terms of physical, mental, and spiritual well-being, right? What role, impact is AI playing in this? And given our crowd, given our particular gathering, I want to spend a little bit more time on the last aspect, on the spiritual well-being. But I don't want us to forget completely these physical and mental issues as well. So we know that there are a whole host of great, exciting applications of AI in healthcare. We've just seen a Pulitzer Prize given for AlphaFold and breakthroughs in looking at the structure of proteins and how that is potentially going to open the way for a lot of great medical developments, for treatments, for vaccines. And the general hope is that if we act well with AI, we'll have tools to pretty much shift medical care and attention to a much more preventative model, because we'll be able to detect different diseases at their earliest stages. We'll be able to shift this to a more personalized model, because we'll have generally better understanding of our health status that we'll be able to track, say through various forms of sensors that are AI driven. And we'll be able to give people more personalized, effective, efficient medical care. That will also be, we hope, more affordable and more accessible to a larger group of people. So there's a lot of excitement in the realm of healthcare. And of course, the Catholic Church has been on the the forefront of promoting physical well-being through her extensive international healthcare system. And so this is a really exciting area for us to harness these tools to achieve some of these goals, some of these dreams of a more affordable, accessible, personalized, preventative healthcare system. Now, there are a host of concerns about how this will affect many aspects of medicine, including the doctor-patient relationship, right? There are legitimate concerns about us crowding out the personal touch, about losing sight of human empathy. And again, we as a church can really be leaders in this regard of harnessing tools as means, as instruments, as aids, without ever setting aside the indispensable role of the human being, to recognize that our healthcare systems have always been about so much more than giving a diagnosis and giving particular medical treatment. It's been about accompanying that person in a moment of vulnerability, in a moment of crisis, and helping that person who perhaps came with little or no faith to realize that this is a moment to open themselves in their vulnerability to the divine, to the transcendent. And how many instances do we have of human history of individuals who came to the Catholic healthcare system with a particular physical ailment, going away open to a spiritual healing? So we should never lose sight of that, even as we wisely use these tools to fulfill some aspects of our mission. Of course, we as a church are deeply concerned about mental health care as well, and we can think about all the ways in which AI systems now potentially make certain attention more accessible to people, right? Now, kind of AI systems associated with mental health counsel that are available, right? Available in a way that human beings are not available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available also in a setting that is perhaps less intimidating for someone who fears the social stigma associated with mental health difficulty, or just has various difficulties speaking to an actual human being. Potentially, these aids could be that first step, that first breakthrough to recognize that I have a difficulty, I have a problem, and I need to address this. And maybe some initial advice could be given to a person who otherwise would just sort of hide in fear and embarrassment that need. Now, I certainly recognize the danger of using these systems as substitutes. And I think our general principle here in AI is that these tools, these means, should always be a supplement, an aid, an assistance, not a substitute for human care. So just as we spoke in physical health care, we can also speak in mental health care of the absolutely indispensable role of that human being, who, by the way, is not going to be available 24 hours, 7 days a week, who is not always going to be able to give that thorough, clear, well-organized, comprehensive response, but is going to be able to give empathy, an empathy, a fellow feeling that AI systems can never provide. So I think of some of these tools as being something comparable to, say, a flight simulator, right? A pilot trains in a flight simulator in a low-risk environment, but that pilot is always training for a real-life situation, which is high risk and dangerous and sometimes scary. But that simulation is ordered to a reality. So I think whenever we're dealing with the integration of AI in our mental health care, we want to take a similar approach. Perhaps people, for whatever trauma or difficulty they've had, can have a kind of low-risk experience of social life. But that simulation is no substitute for the real thing. And so that simulation is a preparation to enter ever more fully into the sometimes scary, even dangerous world of interpersonal relationship. And so that, I think, is the way in which maybe we can use some of these tools and help people enter into deeper social bonds that are so key to our happiness and our flourishing. Because while we might think a lot about apocalyptic situations of out-of-control AI and robots that are bent on destroying us, I think that we're not so much looking to ultimate world destruction, though that could happen, we're already kind of immersed in this shift from artificial intelligence to artificial intimacy, where it's becoming ever more common for people to seek their deepest social bonds and interpersonal connections through AI systems. And when Her, this movie, came out more than a decade ago, it seemed very sci-fi and futuristic. And now it's basically yesterday's news, right? There are so many realities, so many platforms available, some even integrated into familiar platforms like Snapchat, that are making these bold claims of providing you with your best friend or your most intimate lover. And so the church finds herself, I think, in this environment in which she can be a voice and a guide to help people understand the fullest meaning of interpersonal relationships. Because all of us have these vulnerabilities, these deep social needs. We want to be loved, we want to be affirmed, we want support and accompaniment. And all too often, societies fail to provide that. And people become very hurt and very cynical about the possibility of entering into deep relationships. And it will become ever more tempting to take refuge in kind of artificial systems and substitute for that. And so I think the church's role and the church's leadership here is not going to come in condemning weird people who have online girlfriends, not in condemning, but rather recognizing that we have hurt, wounded, vulnerable people who need a community. And by the grace of God, there's no community in the world better equipped to meet these wounds, to meet these needs than the Catholic Church, to provide a real, authentic experience of love, affection, concern, support. And so I think that this moment of artificial intimacy is an evangelical moment. It's a moment for us to propose and re-propose the richness of our community lives. And if people are not finding that in our parishes, if they're not finding that in our schools, we need to seriously reevaluate and do an examination of conscience, because we have this patrimony to share, this experience to share. We're part of a truly global family, a family that extends around the world and throughout history. So there is a place for every wounded, frightened, hurt, vulnerable person in the Catholic Church. And there is a place for authentic friendship and growth for each and every person. So let's take advantage of this moment, which maybe seems kind of strange and odd and weird. And none of us really want to think of the fact that there are all these online friends and girlfriends out there. But trust me, there are all sorts of platforms. There's Nomi, there's Replica, people come. And there are all these AI-generated options out there, and because of my own research, I now receive all sorts of recommendations on my social media platform from my digital girlfriend, but I am very happy in my vocation right now, so I let the AI companies know that I'm taken. But these realities are out there, and we should address them and find the alternative, the rich interpersonal alternative out there. And I also mentioned this kind of shift from attention economy to affection economy because we know so much of our AI has been focused on engagement, on keeping people's attention, in driving ad revenue. And I think it's very logical to expect that attention economy will expand into the affection economy. Because if a company can capture not only your mind, but also your heart, all the better. And we can imagine all of the economic motives or perhaps political motives for manipulating and preying upon certain human vulnerabilities. And so again, this is not sci-fi futuristic stuff. This is what we're already dealing with. And there are people in your parishes, there are people in your universities who, to one degree or another, are exposed to these sorts of models, and I think they're only to become more prevalent. So we have to reflect, we have to anticipate, and we have to really provide the tools to step back and maybe detach ourselves from any unhealthy bonds or affections that might be created in our systems. Okay, so I promise we'll also talk about some of these areas of evangelization, and thankfully there are lots of good, exciting, wonderful uses of AI in the church, and particularly in this context of evangelization. So just a few possible good uses here to highlight, to open up the discussion, right? Think of all the ways that we can already streamline certain administrative tasks, take care of the media notifications that we want to get out there, help us with complicated scheduling, look into our databases. If these tools, these AI tools, can make our work more efficient, all the better. If we can devote more time and energy to actual human, interpersonal, face-to-face interactions rather than sometimes cumbersome administrative tasks, all the better. If we're evangelizing through social media, as many of us are, we can continue to benefit from insights into different demographics. We can look at certain groups. We can help to kind of adapt our messaging accordingly. It's not about diluting our message. It's hopefully not about manipulating people. It's more about finding prudentially the best way to communicate the precious saving gospel that we want to reach all people, right? We want to follow that Pauline model of becoming all things to all people. And so it's legitimate to adapt our tone, our emphasis to different audiences to help them discover the gospel. Of course, we also can see the value of AI chatbots. We see the value of something like Magisterium AI, I think often is that initial engagement. When I went to Catholic.com not knowing what to expect, I was a little overwhelmed. There were so many amazing documents, there were so many amazing resources, but I didn't quite know exactly how or where to start. If you just send someone to the Vatican website, they're going to encounter a long list of Latin documents, Latin titled documents, and you don't really know where to start. But these AI chatbot systems, realities like Magisterium AI, allow people a much more user-friendly interface where they can just take the question that most interests them, whether that's about Mass or Mary or the Rosary or contraception or whatever is piquing their interest. They start there and they are directed immediately to the best insights that the Church provides. And of course, in a way that shows them the larger context. So when you go to Magisterium AI, you're given the best paragraph on the Eucharist or Mary or contraception, but you're also linked to the full document, to the full text, and you're encouraged to then go through and read that passage in its proper context. So this can be a great point of initial engagement to then help people and sort of accompany them along to an ever deeper appreciation for the full picture. So we can tailor our events to community needs based on the data that we've received and come up with new innovative ways of reaching different groups, improving accessibilities. It's so exciting to think about how much easier translation is now and how much more accurate translation is now, right? We always need a little bit of human insight just to make sure you don't do an overly literal translation of a phrase or say something that just sounds strange in that language. But these systems are getting better and better and are making a global message, a Catholic universal message, ever more readily accessible to a global universal audience. I mean, I've worked for a long time in pontifical universities, and I'm used to the fact that in any given class, I probably have at least 10 native languages represented. And so how good and beautiful it is to know that my material, my resources, insights, other material in the Church can be made more easily accessible to them in their own language. Or that those students who might be just struggling to learn Italian or some other foreign language, that they can begin to communicate more readily in their native tongue and share with nuance and depth their own perspectives. And then, of course, also transcripts that can help those who are hearing impaired. And then also just to enhance the online content that we're already out there, to find new ways of making it more engaging, more impactful, more attractive to different groups, to maybe take what we're already doing. If Father is a brilliant homilist, take his homily and utilize AI tools to then kind of represent that more readily in a blog form or as a short article or as a social media post. Take the beautiful fruits of human labor and creativity and help that reach more and more audiences. So again, this is just meant to be a simple introduction to get us thinking about different areas and interests and pitfalls and possibilities. And I'm so excited to hear more and more about your own experience, your own insight to assess this prudently. We saw Ignatius earlier, and I often frame this in a kind of Ignatian context, right? At the beginning of the spiritual exercises, Ignatius reminds us what our life is about. We've been created out of love for love. We are directed to know, love, and serve God on this earth and be happy with him forever. And then Ignatius concludes from there, well, everything else on the face of the earth, everything else should be used insofar, tantum quantum, insofar as it helps us reach that goal, and we should set it aside with spiritual detachment if we see that any means is becoming an obstacle to that goal. So I think above all, more than my slides, we need deep prayer. We need real, deep, authentic discernment. We need to be united to the vine in prayer. We just celebrated the feast of St. John Paul II, right? And he was pretty clear. What was the secret to his day? What made him probably the most influential person of the 20th century? He said it was the Eucharist. It was that hour he'd spend each morning in the presence of the Lord. He was united to the vine. If we are united to the vine, the Lord will provide the insight, the wisdom, the discernment, the prudence that we need to use these tools in tantum quantum, insofar as it fulfills our mission. If we're not united to the vine, if we don't have a rich, deep spiritual life, then we probably shouldn't waste our time traveling around the world and having events and conferences, because our efforts and our most clever strategic plans are going to be fruitless and vain. But if we're united to the vine, then we can trust that through the mystery of mediation, God can and will bear abundant fruit from all of the tools at our disposal. So I often say I am not pessimistic, I am not optimistic about the future. I have hope. I have hope in the future, hope rooted in the Lord, and hope that is open to everything that he wants to provide through the mystery of mediation. And he'll use our spit, our mud, and even our AI systems to spread the gospel. Thank you.